Spirit of the living God, come upon us, calm us, minister to our hearts, and give us light and understanding, that we may enter into a listening mode in this day of retreat and become refreshed in your presence. Come, Holy Spirit, and talk to our hearts. We had this morning the Gospel with regard to the house of God being a house of prayer. We live in the house of God. We need to be therefore alert that where we place our feet, we're treading on holy ground, and to be aware of the majesty that we serve. We are the privileged ones, and we act as a buffer against the devil for souls in their short innings that we call life and time. But the issue is serious, and to banalize it, minimize it, is to play the game of the evil one. We've had recently in Ireland Halloween, which every year is becoming more and more satanic, and we are being warned from good sources to be careful, because it's not just fun and games. There's genuinely satanic stuff going on, hosts are disappearing, and we please have to be careful who's coming up at that time to get them. And
to open the door.
Open the door. Yes, the problem is that the question of coming in the hands has been pushed by Old Nick as well, and that makes it very much easier, as you know, to get it. And that's where and they can come up as well with pixies and so on for the sick, so-called. Where are they ending up? But it's a messy business. And after all, and having lots of extraordinary ministers around doesn't help either, because they don't have the energy to intervene quite often. So they are disappearing a lot, and the abuses being made of them is nobody's business. So, and the result, as we know, at this time of year, an increase in suicides and the like. It's demons released into the air, and more power, as it were, being given into the hands of the evil powers that wish us harm. And a contest of suicide there's a lot going on when a soul is tempted to suicide. It's not just psychological. There is a push. I've heard that from different sources. In fact, I had a man in my kitchen one day saying that he was in prison, and he'd been put eventually in a high security prison, and when he got there, somebody who had been in the IRA was saying that in this place there's a lot of suicides, and obviously this IRA man had a dormant faith, but he said, if that comes to you, don't go through with it. And the other man said, why not? Well, he simply answered in his style, it's not pleasing to the man above. So anyway, the other one got that message, and sometime later, there he was in his cell, thoroughly blue, not wanting to face this long sentence, an awful prison. And this thought came to him out of the blue, and a wonderful, nice, warm feeling. There's a way of shortening this sentence. You get a rope, it can be done in no time. And then he remembered his friend's words, and he turned to this presence, it was genuine presence, and said, are you the one who got all these other people before me to commit suicide? And it changed its tone. Yeah. So, in a very Irish, calm manner, he answered this presence, okay, well, give me an hour to think about it and come back. And the first time in his life he got on his knees and prayed with all his heart, help, help. And then out of this came a great grace, an illumination. He understood things just like that. And he got a grace of illumination which led him to want to see the prison chaplain, and he got his act together, and because of his changed behaviour was let out eventually, much sooner than he would have. So anyway, he goes now around giving his testimony. But the point is this, and it happened also elsewhere, there were a lot of suicides on one bridge, young people taking their lives, throwing themselves off this bridge down to the railway lines underneath her. And eventually there was another girl about to do it at the same spot, and they got her. And they started to ask her, is there something pushing you at this point? And he said, there's something irresistible pulling me to this bridge. So anyway, there's a presence. So all this to say that if we can somehow have our antennae open when we get a slight signal that somebody in danger, it's important to act upon it in time. Because, as I say, there are forces at work in these things which are not good. Now, we have this strange case back in 1992. a fellow called William W. Casciato of Woodbridge in Virginia, in America. He wrote a brief item for a magazine about the time in Catholic high school as a troubled, spiritually harassed adolescent. He was about to end his life off a 50-foot cliff near the school, which overlooked Lake Erie. So, although this testimony is given later in time, the testimony refers to what happened to him early in 1967. It was in Cleveland, the troubled 60s. William, or Bill, had been taunted spiritually. There was poltergeist activity. Objects moved in his bedroom of their own accord. He felt he was being haunted. His parents didn't believe him, and when, at the direction of his parents, he went to see a young cleric, the priest had simply brushed it off and admonished him for being a wicked child who drew the devil to him. He was in need of prayer and penitence, said the cleric. No doubt, this bore truth. But young Casciato also needed understanding. That's where I stood, he says, pointing to the rocky ledge and his suicide attempt, apparently at Village Angelus St. Joseph High School on Lake Shore. Deep in depression and sure of his sinful nature, I resolved that I was powerless except to give Satan what he wanted, my life. Now it could have ended there and he could have gone down. Just before the final exams at our university, one who was doing classics with us disappeared one day. It turned out he'd done that very thing off a cliff. And a friend of mine who was in my class said in Welsh to me, "This is where Philip threw himself off." Oh. Suddenly, a strong arm pulled me away from the edge and whirled me round. I faced an old, frail-looking priest who asked, "Why would you kill yourself?" At this time of confusion and distress, another priest was about the last person he wanted to consult. But there was something about this priest's eyes that conveyed deep compassion and a ready ear. Now that in itself is a lesson to us priests, always to receive people as Jesus would. There's a word in the Carthusian rule which says that a prior must not allow himself a single word that the Lord would not take upon himself. He told this older priest about his crisis, and instead of scoffing or reprimanding, the priest listened to every syllable. And that's kind of important because we do a lot of talking sometimes when we should be listening. When we talk, we block out further knowledge. As I spoke, I made myself remember the face of the only human who would listen unconditionally to my problem. So we start by respecting whoever it is, in whatever state they're in, for what they are. For the bottom line is their humanity, which is equal with ours. We're all in a mess. So we try to help each other as best we can. We must never talk down to a soul. When the priest finally replied, notice he didn't butt in, he finally replied. It was to say, "I have been a priest for too long not to know there's a world beyond our own feeble understanding, my son. The spirit who troubles you doesn't know he's dead. Tell him to go to the light, and in 3 days he'll be gone." I nodded and turned to the lake and remarked, "I'd be dead by now." if not for you, Father. No answer came in response. He turned and saw that the priest was walking toward the Marionist house. Go to the light, he heard the priest call out. William took the advice, and in 3 days the spiritual issue in his room was resolved. He found peace and a new perspective in life. 4 years later, I chanced to visit the Marionist house on business. On the vestibule wall hung a picture of the kindly priest who had saved my life and my soul. The clerk read, born 1855, died 1930. So, the frontier is not as dense as we think between this world and the next. The communion of saints is a strange mystery, and at the altar, the two realms are strangely brushing shoulders. We have power, real power, in our hands in the canon as we place names in those mementos. They're waiting for us. Help! Alas, there are many out there who class the likes of hell with the fables of Santa Claus, from which one grows up and out at adolescence. That's linked with childhood. Again, a ploy of the demon. Here, this is painfully contemporary. A widow who was a sleazy slumlord and porno dealer for 30 years became a God-fearing pillar of society overnight after one event. She was 53 at this point, giving this testimony, and she was talking to reporters in Rome. I've had a glimpse of hell, she said, through my husband's eyes, and I'll do anything to keep from joining him there. And this is to secular reporters. So this is what happened in her case. Before her eerie encounter, the widow operated a small empire of rat-infested slum apartments outside Rome and ran an underworld porno ring that produced magazines for sale overseas. My husband, Sal, and I ran the business together before he died last year, Sophia recalled. We lived in style, but we were living off the misery and appetites of others. After Sal died, I took over the entire operation myself and was pleased with the life I was leading. But all that changed the day Sal appeared in Sophia's bedroom, his eyes burning like coals. He stood before me, a shrunken, broken soul. So different from the cocky, confident man I knew for 30 years. The reformed porno queen told reporters. He told me he had been condemned to a life in hell. He said it was far worse than anything he had imagined, and he warned me I would be joining him there if I didn't mend my ways. To live in hell is to have a body that is constantly on fire, he said. Then he pressed the palm of his hand against a heavy wooden door, and his palm burned into the wood like a branding iron. A moment later, he vanished, leaving his handprint behind as a reminder of his warning. But believe me, that terrifying message burned itself into my mind as clearly as his handprint had burned into the door. I wasn't about to forget. That night, Sophia visited a priest to confess her sins and beg for forgiveness. Now, Father Angelo Macchi has this to report. She took me to her home and showed me the handprint on the door, and that now actually can be seen. It's been taken to a church on the edge of the Tiber, not far from the Vatican, where there is a small museum of purgatory. After seeing that and hearing her story, I have no doubt her husband paid her a visit from hell. The next day, the shaken lady disbanded her illegal pornography operation and began turning her run-down tenement into luxury apartments, which she gave to the city to be used as low-rent housing for the poor. Now, she went further than maybe she had to. She made a full confession of her activities to the Carabinieri, said the priest. But so far nothing has come of it, because she is living the life of a model citizen. She has given her money to charity and lives in a tiny apartment right next to the door of my own church. She is a woman who truly has found God, and probably just in the nick of time. So much for those who maintain that hell probably exists but has no candidates. When we are dealing with souls who are suffering, and it can be quite often the case of a priest because of the sacramental help that we give to them in that state, we can encourage them, if they're really suffering a lot, to be aware that they could have a special vocation, especially at that stage of their life, to be victim souls and to help others to make it who wouldn't. Just at the turn of the century, there was a woman married in Paris, just a good, ordinary Catholic girl, to, alas, an atheist doctor. C'était Dr. Félix Lasseur. He attempted to break down the faith of his wife, who reacted by studying her faith. In 1905, she was taken ill and tossed on a bed of constant pain until August 1914. When she was dying, she said to her husband, "Felix, when I am dead, you will become a Catholic and a Dominican priest." Elisabeth, I know my sentiments. I've sworn hatred of God. I shall live in the hatred and I shall die in it. She repeated her words and passed away. Rummaging through her papers, he found her will. In 1905, I asked Almighty God to send me sufficient sufferings to purchase your soul. On the day I die, the price will have been paid. Greater love than this no woman has, than she who laid down her life for her husband. Dr. Lasser dismissed it as the fancies of a pious woman. He went to Lourdes to write a book against Our Lady. But as he looked up into the face of the statue, he received the great gift of faith. So total, so complete was it, that he never had to go through the process of juxtaposition and say, how will I answer this or that difficulty? He saw it all at once. Summoned to Rome by Pope Benedict XV, Dr. Lasser recounted his conversion and said he wanted to become a Dominican priest. At first, the Holy Father refused and said he must stay in the world to repair the harm he had done. After speaking to Father Jean Vignia, who accompanied Dr. Lasser, the Holy Father changed his mind. Lent 1924. I made my retreat, says the one writing this, in the Dominican monastery in Belgium, where 4 times each day and 45 minutes each time I listened to Father Felix Lasser, Catholic Dominican priest, who told me this story. Archbishop Fulton J.